Hi, Jessica Lange. It's such an honor. I'm a little nervous. Apologies, because I adore you. I love you. I'm sorry I'm super nervous. I'm super nervous. I love you.
What's going on? You're listening to Chicago Humanities Tapes, the audio arm of Chicago Humanities, the live festival bringing you the best in arts, culture, politics, science, and the other humanities for over 30 years. I'm Alisa Rosenthal, and I really love today's chat. It's with none other than the actress and goddess herself, Jessica Lange, joined by Chicago theater critic Chris Jones to chat about her stunning black and white street photography. And he couldn't let her get away without diving into some of her iconic roles in Tootsie, Cape Fear, American Horror Story, among others. I'm always fascinated by people who can effortlessly exist in two spaces at the same time. Why can't you be an Oscar-winning actress and also a thoughtful, moving photographer? If you like your highbrow discussions of French philosophy with a dash of lowbrow 70s-era New York celebrity gossip, this conversation is for you. Make sure to click the link in the description to the show notes for more info on her work and some of the photos she mentions. Head over to chicagohumanities.org, where you can also find a full transcript and links to our previous episodes. While there, take your shoes off, get comfy. You can also check out our full calendar of upcoming events. You can still nab tickets to your favorite speakers at our Spring Festival, which runs through June 11th, 2023. All right, friends, without further ado, La Lange.
Hi, everybody. How lucky am I tonight? This is kind of a fabulous opportunity. Ms. Lange, how are you? Welcome to Chicago.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is so exciting. Your interest in photography seems to have begun when your then husband, Sam Shepard, the late Sam Shepard, who I've been thinking about because I actually did a program with Sam Shepard at this very festival a number of years ago. But somewhere in the 1990s, he gives you a camera, a Leica N6, I think it is?
M6.
M6. So, and all of a sudden, this sparks this very long career now in photography you've had. And I guess I'd like to ask, what was it about a Leica M6 that... Because you think of a camera as just a camera, and yet, are they really that cool that you were able to sort of do that?
I mean, my interest in photography actually predated the
that.
gift from Sam. When I was at the University of Minnesota as a freshman, I met a group of photographers and quit school and went off to live in Europe with them while they were making a film on... It was much more interesting, let me tell you.
There were some hot guys in that class.
Yeah, there really were. And we traveled to southern Spain, and so that was my first interest in photography, but it was more just as an observer. And then we all moved back to New York City and became involved with Robert Frank and Danny Lyon and some of the seminal photographers of that era. So I knew always about the power of photography. Then a couple decades later, I started collecting, and I surrounded myself with great photographers' work. And so that when Sam gave me the camera, and to address the Leica M6 mystique, it is the finest, it is one of the finest, maybe the finest camera. Yeah, I had this amazing, gift, and I thought, well, I have to do something with this. So
You just showed up with it one day?
Yeah. Well, he knew I was, because I had talked a lot about photography, and I had started collecting photography, and so when I got the camera, I thought, well, all right, now I have to do this seriously. So I built a dark room and started processing my own film and printing and taking the camera with me everywhere I went. And that was the beginning.
So, for the first many decades of your career, you were more photographed than photographing.
Certainly.
So, I always think of, and obviously you were are a very, very famous person. And generally speaking, most famous people dislike being photographed. It's invasive to them. I'm guessing it was invasive to you, especially at certain periods when you were up for 2 Academy Awards in the same year and all the rest of it. Did you learn anything from being photographed in terms of becoming a photographer?
I remember Mary Ellen Mark, a great photographer, who looked at my work one time and said, I would describe your approach as a fly on a wall. I never like to intrude on the moment, the person, the situation, so I would try to be as anonymous as possible when I was on the street taking photographs or whatever, which is the opposite of what a paparazzi does, who's like in your face in the most intrusive, personal way possible. So, and I think in some strange way, the photography was a wonderful counterpoint to acting, in that, you know, an actor is like constantly surrounded by people. Your work is dependent on crews and other actors, director. I mean, it's not like being a writer or being a painter. You don't have control over time and space and all of that. You're really involved in a communal effort. What I found with photography was it was just the most personal and intimate and private thing. And I loved that about it because, like I said, it was the absolute counterpoint kind of to my life as an actor. And I could just wander around by myself, almost like in a state, you know, a meditative state, and just do it privately. I found that I really actually needed that at some point in my life.
But I mean, didn't some of the people you were photographing suddenly look at you and go, oh, wait a minute, this is Jessica Lange.
I honestly don't think they did. I just, no, I mean, people, well, like with this last project, a lot of the people I was photographing were people who were the only other people out on the street. Many of them were homeless people.
This is during the pandemic?
Yeah. It was a unique experience. And I would never point my camera at somebody, but I didn't want them to know that I was there or that I was photographing them. So there was no direct contact. But at a certain point, when I was doing my previous book, Highway 61, I loved the idea of the direct contact and that thing of the kind of call and response in a way. Yeah. That transcends time, so that you look at a photograph decades later and that person is like, you feel connected to them because they're looking directly at you. But I never did that without first getting their permission and saying, especially like with the homeless people on the street, because it's such a fraught situation, and I never wanted them to think that I was there just kind of, you know, recording their situation. So I would always talk to them, and I would always ask, would it be all right if I photographed you? Would it be all right if I took your picture? And no one ever said no. So
really?
Yeah, it was. I really felt fortunate and gifted that I, you know, had that opportunity.
I had this revelation once. I was in a Broadway theater, and I was in the men's room, and I realized that I was peeing next to Billy Crystal, in fact. And I remember that his eyes were focused on, his own business. And I remember thinking to myself that this is the price of celebrity a bit, that you don't, even celebrities who are very, very nice to people often have so much interaction with people that they don't seek out more of it from the general public. So in other words, they go through life trying to contain on some levels interaction. I don't mean that to be critical. I mean just to survive and to not get caught up with too many people with all these things they want to tell you and all scripts they want to give you and all the rest of it. What you've been doing is the opposite of that, where you've been going up to strangers essentially and saying, "Mate, I take a photograph." It's a strange juxtaposition in your life, it seems. So you must want to seek out more human contact on some level.
Yes, and definitely that was the case when during the pandemic, because when the lockdown happened, and it happened so dramatically and so abruptly, New York just kind of emptied out.
Yeah.
Anybody who could leave left. If they had, the opportunity, the choice, the ability to. And what was left was a New York that I hadn't seen for decades and decades and decades. It was a whole different kind of energy suddenly on the streets, and it really was about survival. It was about absence, and it was about loneliness. And when I would encounter these people, I mean, it was an exchange that was very heartfelt on both of our parts, because sometimes they would be the only people I would speak to during the course of the day, except, on the telephone or whatever. But most of my friends were gone, my family wasn't there, and everything had shut down, so it wasn't even like you were having a casual exchange with a waiter or a cab driver or anything. And also the fact that normally in New York, when you're moving around the city, and I'm sure it's the same here, everybody is with a purpose, and everybody is distracted in a way. They're either looking at their phone, or they're thinking about where they're going, or they're in conversation with somebody. So there isn't the opportunity to just slow way down and observe who's around you and who is available. But during that time, which was this extraordinary kind of moment in the city, you had all the time in the world because there was nothing to do, and you weren't going anywhere, and there were no appointments, and you had no destination, which was part of this practice of derive. So when I would see somebody and make eye contact with them, I could tell that their impulse was the same as mine, which was to have some kind of connection. And oftentimes I would stop and we would talk for half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe more, and it was a unique experience, and I really thought of it as a gift.
I mean, you wouldn't have been able to do that 30 years. Would you have wanted to do that in the 90s? Or is this something that you are happier doing now than you would have been then?
I probably am happier doing it now because, I have have with age that my life empties out somewhat, My children are grown.
Yeah.
My husband is gone. The career is somehow
It's not so bad.
in kind of a stall. No, you just don't have the opportunity to work as much as you used to. So I think of it more as a gift because it's allowed me to do things that I wouldn't normally do or have time to do or interest in.
So obviously this is not, you've done many books of photography, 50 photographs in Mexico, unseen, and then the Highway 61 piece you just mentioned, going back, I think, to 2008. So There's many of these collections of photographs, but this new one then...
Derive.
Derive. So what you do is you have no purpose, but you still have the Leica, presumably, the same Leica.
Well, okay, so so the way it started was I was in New York, it was the fall, and I mentioned to my son, I don't know, what am I going to do, you know? I mean, I had gone to my cabin, which I always do in northern Minnesota for the summer, and come back. And then the idea of being in New York, and the streets were empty. There was very little traffic. Pedestrians had disappeared. And I said to my son, I don't know what I'm going to do here through the fall and winter and spring. I mean, it's going to... And he said, do you know there's practice of derive, the theory of derive, which I had never heard of, and it based on the work of this mid-century French philosopher Guy Debord. Basically what he's saying is that you leave your house with no purpose in mind. I mean, I guess the closest translation to derive would be to drift. And with no expectations, you let go of all your usual reasons for going out and moving about. And you just allow yourself to be drawn, and he says usually in an urban terrain, by the attractions and the encounters that you have there. So I started doing that several times a week for I gave myself 6 months. And I would walk out the front door and just randomly decide, do I go right, do I go left, do I go uptown, do I go downtown, do I go east, do I go west, with no preconceived idea of what I was going to do that day. And you just kind of start to wander, and you're just wandering, kind of being drawn by like, oh, I've never seen that before, and you start down that block, and I found some days I'd walk as many as 10 miles.
Oh, wow. 10 miles? That's a long way.
That is a lot, yes. and I did that for a few days, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to start carrying my camera with me, because I really want to have it was never with a purpose in mind. It wasn't like, I want to do a book about this, or it was really just as a visual diary, because what I was seeing was so fascinating in this rather unnatural way. So I started walking and with the camera, and again, it wasn't like, for instance, when I shot Highway 61, I was deliberately going out looking for photographs because I had this theme in mind.
Highway 61, remind me where that is. That goes from...
It goes from the Canadian border in northern Minnesota,
right,
and ends in New Orleans.
And you went the entire...
Oh, many times, yeah, many times. That's always interested me a lot, and Highway 61, I mean, I'm sure like if you drove Route 66, I mean, it's a historic highway, not just because of Dylan, but, you know, I mean.
What was the source of your fascination with New Orleans?
I've always loved New Orleans, And then we filmed there for 2 seasons of American Horror Story. And I decided finally that it was someplace that I wanted to live. So I was there for about 5 years. And then, like everything else in my life, one day I woke up and I thought, what the fuck am I doing here? And sold the house and left. So
You're not really one for sitting in Beverly Hills and collecting awards, and I mean, you could be doing that.
I wouldn't mind collecting awards. I'm not going to sit in Beverly Hills, though.
But you have remained tethered more than most of your peers to the Midwest, right? I mean, that's
I mean, I've always kept a cabin up in northern Minnesota.
This is a plush cabin, or it's a rough and rustic? Is it a Hollywood cabin or it's a real cabin?
Well, it's definitely not a Hollywood cabin, but it's also not some, I don't have to go out and pump water.
I would hope not. I would hope not. I would hope not.
In northern Minnesota, because, that's where I'm from, I would go to these places that I would remember or, that I felt a connection to. Or when I would shoot down in Mexico, it was always with the purpose of finding a photograph, of like wandering with your camera and trying to find something, having the patience to find the photograph. With Derive, it wasn't that. It was really, I wasn't thinking in terms of, that's an interesting photograph. I was thinking in terms of, I just want a record of this time, and not necessarily thinking, is this a good photograph? Is this a, vital photograph? Whatever. It was just as a kind of visual diary of this extraordinary and unnatural time in New York City.
And you don't crop your photo. You don't run something through some digital magic afterwards. You just simply, the photo is the photo. Is that right?
Yeah, I've always, because one of my favorite photographers, and I don't mean this to sound like, pompous, is Cartier-Bresson. He always included the negative line in his prints so that you knew he was printing full frame. He was never cropping. And that was just a conceit that I tried to imitate.
So it's a sort of, for you, it's a legitimate, it's the honest, full picture sort of thing.
It's what you saw, what the camera recorded, what you saw through the viewfinder.
So how do you do it? Like, what's your advice? What makes, you walk out there with your camera, your Leica camera, and you have, what makes a good shot? What do you do?
Well, I think that's, I look at like the great photographers, and I'm believe me, that I'm not in any way consider myself in that, I don't. So anyhow, that goes without.
Well, so stipulated. You're pretty good. So.
But what I notice when I look at their photographs is that, and you can tell when something happens in an instant and when they have like composed it. In other words, like with Cartier-Bresson, there's a moment, that famous photograph of the man, jumping the puddle. Well, the fact that he was there at that moment, camera ready, and caught him kind of mid-flight is just a miracle. This is what I think it has in common with acting, is that it forces you to be present, that you absolutely have to be present in the moment to know what the truth is and to be available to it. So in that way, the disciplines have been beneficial because they've made me practice that.
I always think of acting as that actors are not so much playing characters as playing characters in motion, that we're always, everything's moving in the world. And great actors like yourself often have a kind of a kinetic quality where you're just constantly, many of your famous characters, some of which I was watching today, are always in constant motion, and yet here you are with an art form that's about capturing stillness, really. I think actors probably have a deeper understanding of human emotion than regular people.
You do?
I do. Don't you? They're more empathetic, generally. They understand, because that's what they do.
Well, yeah, you get to make believe a lot. You get to, that is one of the things you can explore, like, the worst of human nature and the most difficult wells of emotion, and then go home at night and hold your kids and watch TV. I mean, I think one of the reasons actually I was drawn to acting is because it does allow you to explore things that hopefully you can avoid in real life. I mean, the characters that I've always been drawn to, like Frances Farmer or Blanche Dubois or Mary Tyrone, I mean, I wouldn't want any of their lives. But to pretend to actually, delve into that and fall down those wells has been, I mean, it's been a wonderful gift.
I always think your work in Tootsie was, one of your great performances, and yet you were sort of the only person in that film who was not funny. I mean, you were.
I'm never funny. I'm never funny.
And I was thinking, how did that work out like that? I mean, that's a sort of.
I
It's an enigma, that role in that movie.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, because I had just finished shooting Frances, which just about killed me.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And I'd worked with the great Kim Stanley. And she gave me this advice when we finished shooting. She said, "Do a comedy next." And I thought, oh, Jesus. I'm not interested in comedy. First of all, I can't do comedy because I'm not funny. So, I mean, why would I do? And then Sidney Pollack just started pursuing me about that part. And finally I, flashed back on Kim's advice and I thought, all right. So that's how that all came about. But no, I'm not funny in it, and everybody else is incredibly funny. Yeah.
But the presence of you not being funny is what makes that movie work, really.
I was sitting with my two granddaughters when they were really young, and we were watching TV, and I was going through the channels, and there was Tootsie. And I thought, I'm not going to say anything to her. And we're watching it, and I'm waiting for them to say, "Ma'am, that's you." And, because, I was at my prime. I looked great. And finally, after watching it for quite a while, I said to the kids, "That's me." And it was a scene with me and Dustin. And Dustin's in drag and that horrible wig and that crazy, voice and everything. And they looked at it, and they turned to me and they said, "Which one?"
You're pretty funny. That's pretty funny. That is pretty funny. That's very good. Very dryly delivered.
That put me in my place.
Yeah. Well, what I thought we'd do for a minute is let's look at the latest collection, the derive, that are in this. Shall we do that? 2020.
Well, I gave myself 6 months to do this practice. And in a sense, it's kind of like a walking meditation because, you're just being drawn by things. And Debord also talks about psychogeography, about how certain areas, certain zones have an energy and a kind of a magnetic pull or repel, I guess, the same way. And it was interesting because I would find that my emotional response to certain neighborhoods and places I hadn't walked ever in all the decades that I've lived in New York would affect me emotionally. Sometimes I'd be oh, I gotta get out of here. And sometimes I would just be suddenly filled with this kind of, I don't know, it was almost like a joy just being here in this area. Because, like I said, I wasn't interested in doing a book or anything like that. I just wanted a diary, a visual diary of what the city looked and felt like at this time. So I gave myself 6 months to do these walks, these random wanderings. And in the beginning, I didn't carry my camera, then I started to. So all of the photographs in this book, and I think there are 49 of them, are just moments that I captured as I was walking by. Nothing was set up, nothing was anticipated. So that's the practice.
It's interesting, these photographs of the city, and Sam Shepard, who you were married to, I always think of as sort of the poet of wide open spaces in many ways. He was a sort of of openness, and it's funny to think, imagine the two of you together. It must have been interesting.
Yeah. I mean, our histories were, we came from such different places. I mean, he was from Duarte, California, and the desert and the, Central Valley, and I was from the woods of Minnesota. I mean, I do know that he was never terribly comfortable in the deep woods, so that's not having an eye on the horizon, yeah.
Now, I remember when he came here, he didn't fly, he drove. I mean, he would drive everywhere, right?
He drove everywhere. Mm-hmm.
You learn a lot from, you work with some great movie directors, and I think I read somewhere that you would, when you work with Fosse, that I think you said once that you learned precision from him, because he was such a precise artist, and then all these other directors, it must have, as an actor and as a photographer, the influence of those directors, which really were the greats of the 20th century in Hollywood, that must have rubbed off on you. I'm just curious about some of the directors that you work with.
Well, yeah, I feel really lucky because, I can count, directors like Fosse and Bob Rafelson, Sidney Pollack, Tony Richardson, Scorsese. I had the chance, Costa Gavras, just the best directors of that time when movies, the best films, I think. I was lucky because, I came in right during the height of that kind of auteur movement in Hollywood. The studios were gone, basically, that whole studio way of approaching filmmaking. And now you had these artists who were making the best work of their lives. And I was so lucky because that doesn't really exist now. And I remember Sidney Pollack saying to me at one time, the kind of films that we've made our lives doing, that's going to be over. Because the middle ground is about to be absorbed by, and that was at the beginning of what they used to call the big tentpole movies and the, the sequels and the
franchises.
The franchises
right.
and all of that. And when you think of it, I just did a film in Ireland. We were making a film of Long Day's Journey and Tonight. With an amazing cast and a great adaptation of, to me, the greatest American play, but had so much trouble with the financing, and it wasn't an expensive film to make. We were all working for nothing. It wasn't like there were salaries to be paid, but it just spoke to how difficult it is to make those kind of films nowadays. Whereas, in the 70s, the 80s, Fosse could make a film like All That Jazz, or Sidney could do Tootsie, and, they had enough money in the budget, and it was well done, and people weren't scrimping and saving, And they knew it was going to have a run in a theater. It wasn't going to go to fucking streaming and like all this bullshit. I mean, yeah, I don't like streaming.
I've got to ask you, that 1 year when you were up for, it was Best Leading Actress and Best Supporting Actress on the same Academy Awards, which probably many people in this room remember that. What was that like?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, it was good. I mean, it was the first time I'd really been recognized for my work as an actor, with Frances and Tootsie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was thrilled.
Was there a period of time when roles were coming at you so fast that you ended up not doing things that you wish you'd done?
Yeah, a couple, but not many. But I could name like maybe two or three. I won't mention them because the actresses that played them were wonderful, and why do that?
Yeah.
But there were some, I'm sorry, I missed. However, my bigger regret is all the shit that I did. I would say, and I haven't done that many films. I've done like maybe 30-some films, 35, and I mean over a 45-year period of time.
So were you just not good at recognizing shit when it came your way? Is that
Yeah, I think partly, because an actor, I mean, you hadn't worked for a year or thing, and you're thinking, God, I better work. So you take something that you don't necessarily like, or you're hopeful that you can, there's always that thing, I think I can make something of this. I think I can make this work. But I would say, over of those 30-some films I've made, maybe a third of them have been good films, and the rest are just, I don't know, for one reason or another, pure shite.
And the couple what were the couple that you loved the most?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, all the early ones, Frances, Tootsie, Sweet Dreams, Music Box, Cape Fear. God, I can't even remember any of my films. But, and then in like later, I found the most rewarding work was in television. When I did Grey Gardens, even, about Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. I mean, those, in later years, those were the most rewarding. Yeah.
Okay.
Even some of the characters that I did in American Horror Story, I really,
And that's a whole new generation of fans, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm amazed. Yeah.
And where will you take your camera next?
I have no idea. None. I have no project in mind.
All right. If you have questions for Ms. Lange, now is the glorious moment.
Hi, my name is Chase, and I was curious as to how your practice of derive has evolved since finishing that 6-month photography period, and if you still practice, and also how maybe lessons you've learned during that have informed your life since.
Well, yeah, I don't practice it regularly now because I haven't been in the city that much. But for instance, today, because I flew into Chicago last night and then didn't have to be here until this evening, I did start walking.
Oh, wow. Where did you go? You went...
I walked for about 5 miles today and ended up going all the way down to the river, following the river, then saw a sign that said Navy Yard,
Navy Pier?
Navy Pier.
Yeah.
So I wandered out there and then came back, and so I still love to wander. That, it's that great Kierkegaard quote, above all, do not lose your desire to walk. So I think of that all the time.
I think about 400 people are going to, beginning tomorrow morning, going to leave their homes.
Well, read Guy Debord and his theory of derive. It might inspire you to start wandering aimlessly. I don't know.
Just quickly before I ask my question, I have to tell you, I've loved you forever. Since I was a teenager, and when I sat through Sweet Dreams twice in the theater, I was hooked forever. I love you so much. And it's been a joy to share with my daughter, like watching AHS. But anyway, what gave you the courage when you were very young to just take off and go on these adventures? I have to tell you, as a mother, I feel guilty because my daughter wanted to do that. She didn't want to go to college, and I said, "You got to go to college. You got to go to college." And I feel like, but I so admire people like you and Bob Dylan, dare I say, who just like take off and go and because you have to do it when you're young. What
That's a
gave
great
you
question.
that
That's a
courage
great
to
question.
do that?
I don't know what it was, but I just knew running off to Europe with this group of guys was going to be a lot more interesting than the University of Minnesota. But no, I don't know. It's I always think of like the last couple lines of James Joyce, the Ulysses, and that thing of, and I said yes, yes, yes. And I think, yeah, that's what we have to do, because, now that I'm this age, I think, oh my God, if I hadn't said yes to everything that came my way, my life I would have never gone like the direction I did and be kind of swept away and taken places and done things. And I'm so grateful that I did, that I didn't hesitate, even, when maybe I should have, but I didn't. So.
Hi, Ms. Lange. My name is Jamie, a longtime fan. Really appreciate you being here, and thank you for sharing another form of your art with us tonight. My question is, do you find that your work in front of the camera has influenced what draws you in as subject matter or as composition for your photography?
Well, I've, beside being like having the opportunity to work with such great directors, I've also worked with really great cinematographers. And it hasn't been like a conscious kind of, learning experience, but I think having done films for as long as I have, I began to understand the power, the emotional power of the frame and the lighting. I know just having shot Long Day's Journey into Night, that thing of they talk about the fog all the time, and you get a sense of the light and the fog and the weather and everything affecting the emotional lives of these characters, the people.
Did you ever walk behind the camera and look and see what the cinematographer was doing and seeing?
Yes, back when we didn't have playback, which really dates me, but you would actually step behind camera, maybe even look through the lens to see how it's framed. And now, of course, nobody. I remember working with Tony Richardson, the great English director, and he would have this was the time where like the director was like standing right next to the camera and he was watching you like this. He wasn't in like video land over there. And there was a great synergy. There was a great exchange of energy, knowing that like not only the camera was watching you, but the director was an extension of it. And there was I just found that, I don't know, very exciting in a way. Now, of course, they're looking at, playback and designing the shots and everything from what they see on playback. But in the beginning, the only way you would know you would step back behind the camera and ask the cinematographer if you could see what his frame was or whatever. But yes, I mean, I love doing that, and I love that thing of the camera and the cinematographer and the director all like kind of right there with you. There was a great exchange of energy. There was like alchemy in a way. It like created something.
It's another way that personal connection has gone the way of the, now it's all, yeah.
Hi, Ms. Lange. Thank you so much for coming to Chicago and making our night. Seriously, but Feud was my favorite miniseries of all time. And you embodied Crawford like no other. And I really wanted to get your feeling. What do you think of the woman? Was she a villain or a Hollywood victim? Miss Lange, can you please answer that for me and my friends? Thank you so much. I have to know.
That's great. That's great.
It's interesting because I grew up on old movies. So I watched a lot of, and Crawford was never somebody that I was really drawn to as an actor. But when Ryan called me about doing this, I thought, Joan Crawford, I don't know anything about her. I haven't even really, I've been a fan all these years. So I started looking into her life and really learning about her and watching her film, and then I was just in awe of her. I thought, this woman, first of all, she was one of the all-time great survivors. She was powerful. She had a life force. One of the things that I loved, and I'd study it over and over and over again, even though I didn't have any scenes like this in the film, obviously, because this was when she was like just up from Texas in her early 20s, maybe late teens. But to watch her dance was something, the abandon and the sensuality and just kind of, just in your face type of, energy and sexuality that she had. I thought, God damn, this woman she is unique. And I actually just fell in love with her doing that. So no, I didn't see her as a victim. All women were victims of Hollywood during that period. But she had such power and such personal strength. I think she was just extraordinary. And also talent. She was really a talented actress.
Hi, do you mind sharing some of your favorite experiences when you were a roommate with Grace Jones and Jerry Hall?
I was going to ask, that's a great question. I was just wondering that myself.
Okay, we need a disclaimer here because
we're off the record. It's
this
all
myth
private.
has been, I don't know where this started. Grace and I were great friends. I loved Grace. We spent a lot of time together. We had a lot of fun.
This is in Paris.
This was in Paris.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun together. We were great pals. We hung out. Jerry Hall was never, I don't know how that got started.
What do you mean?
I met her briefly through a mutual friend, this wonderful artist by the name of Antonio. And, but I never hung out with her, and I never got to know her. so that myth that Jerry Hall and Grace Jones and I were like living together in Paris or something, it's not true.
But the Grace Jones part.
The Grace Jones part is absolutely true. The Jerry Hall part, Mrs. Murdoch, is not true.
Hi, Miss Lange. When I was 9 years old, which was in 1977, 45 years ago, I saw a little movie called King Kong. And it was the first time I'd been in a theater, and it began my kind of lifelong love of movies. Right? And I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about that film and that performance and parlaying that into the great dramatic career you had after that.
This was your first film, right?
It was my first film. It was my first actual audition. I had been living in Paris with Grace Jones. At some point, I had been there studying mime with the great old master Etienne Ducroux. And after a couple of years living in Paris, and I thought, I can't make I can't make money as a mime. What are you going to just... And I have to, it wasn't like, I had to get a job. So I thought, well, I better get back to New York. So I finally left Paris, sadly, and moved back to New York City. I was working as a waitress at the Lion's Head down in the Village. And I was taking acting classes because I thought, I can mime. Maybe I should try acting. So I was taking acting classes in New York City, and I went to see a modeling agent thinking, I don't know, maybe I could make some money modeling. I never did, by the way, but she said, are you interested in acting? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, we got a call looking for, young models to go out and audition for a film. Would you want to do that? I thought, well, sure. I'll take a break from my waitressing job so that's how it happened. And they flew me out to Los Angeles. I went to MGM, which was like kind of this fantasy come true, my favorite studio all the time I was growing up. Watching MGM movies. And so got to Los Angeles, went to MGM to do this audition, and they were absolutely not interested in me whatsoever, at all. I weighed about 20 pounds less than I do right now. I'd been living in Paris, going to the disco with Grace every night. And I had shaved my eyebrows, and I had a blonde afro like Dietrich in Blonde Venus. So I walked in, and everybody else in the audition room were these like real California babes. Yeah, tits and ass, and I thought, oh well, this has been a mistake, and they thought, this is a mistake, and that's how it. But the agent called and said, because they were just going to send me home. The agent called and said, okay, you've flown her out there, at least put her on film. Let her just read or something. So, they gave me the pages, the sides, and I did this scene. Nobody was around, not the director, not the producer, not the casting director. No, I think the second AD was like, said roll. And, but then, he must have called somebody, because then the AD came, and then pretty soon the director showed up, and they said, can you stay a little while long? And that's how it happened, Then the producer, Dino De Laurentiis, came and watched, and by the time I left Los Angeles, they had offered me this part. And I thought, wow, this is crazy. I'm working as a waitress in New York at the Lion's Head, living in a 5th floor walk-up. I'd never have enough money even for the subway. And now I'm going to be in like what at the time was one of the most expensive films ever made. And it wasn't how I imagined starting at all. I really had this fantasy about, oh, I'll do off-Broadway, and then maybe I'll get a Broadway part, then maybe I can audition for film. You know, I had this whole scenario in my, but it started this way.
And then your life changed instantly when you...
Instantly, yeah. But what it felt like was that my life was interrupted.
What do you mean?
That I was living this really interesting life, and then suddenly I'm making a movie. It wasn't, I know that sounds odd, but it felt like this had interrupted my life somehow.
Well, now you've got it back.
Yeah, doing nothing.
Hi, Jessica Lange. My name is Sean. It's such an honor. I'm a little nervous. Apologies, because I adore you. I absolutely adore you. But I was wondering, though, if you could expand upon, there's loneliness and absence is something that you've mentioned a lot this evening. And it's also something that I feel like a lot of roles that you take on have a lot of emptiness and loneliness and absence to them. And I wondered how that related to the photography, and also if you could expand on that, as well as your time as a mime, whenever you talked about being a fly on the wall and going off and photographing. And I was wondering about if you thought about how all those things correlated. And if you could expand on that, I would appreciate it. And again, I love you. I'm sorry, I'm super nervous. I'm super nervous. I love you.
Well, the loneliness is something I feel like I've lived with my whole life. Even as a child, I felt that kind of loneliness. And during different times in my life, it has been, it's been alleviated somewhat, you know, like when my children were young and, you know, family, and then other times where it's been just overwhelming. And I think that the loneliness has informed, obviously, you know, the parts that I'm drawn to. It also always, I think, informs my photography. And I feel like, now I've just spent 2.5 months in Ireland. And being out in the country there and being in the city and being around people, I didn't feel the loneliness there. But there is something, I think, in this country that feeds loneliness and isolation and separateness and that sense of absence. And what, to me, it's like, what has gone missing? So all those things, and like I said, to varying degrees, I've lived with that my whole life, even as a child. And I've never been able to escape that. So I'm drawn to those. I'm drawn to those characters. For instance, Mary Tyrone. I actually went through the play once and counted how many times she says alone, or lonely, or lonesome. So when I play that, I don't have to imagine it. I mean, it's like a fulfillment in a way, as odd as that sounds.
So this whole evening has been a bit like going out for dinner with Jessica Lange and having a drink with Jessica Lange, and I hope you're buoyed by the really palpable affection that I can feel really in this room for you and your work, and it's just a real honor to have had this evening with you. Ladies and gentlemen, Jessica Lange.
That was Jessica Lange with Chris Jones at the Chicago Humanities Fall Festival at Francis W. Parker School in 2022. Chicago Humanities Tapes is produced and hosted by me, Alisa Rosenthal, with help from the awesome team over at Chicago Humanities. Shout out to the wonderful staff who are programming these live events and making them sound fantastic. For more than 30 years, Chicago Humanities has created experiences through culture, creativity, and connection. Check out chicagohumanities.org for more information on becoming a member, so you'll be the first to know about upcoming events and other insider perks. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode for you. But in the meantime, stay human.